recognizing Chilliwack.
Yes, just straight Chilliwack. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion that we, Her Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia in session assembled, beg leave to thank Her Honour for the gracious speech which Your Honour has addressed to us at the opening of the present session. I'd first like to begin by acknowledging that I'm on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, in particular that of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. I'd also like to take a second, Madam Speaker, to congratulate you on your appointment. It's very nice to have your steady hand in the chair and your wonderful mask. It's wonderful to look at while I'm speaking. So I'd just like to say, Madam Speaker, that this is the best job I've ever had. In fact, it will probably be the best job I'll ever have. And it is an incredible honor to serve my community and bring their perspective and concerns here to Victoria. It's an immense privilege to be in this chamber and able to speak on behalf of my community. So as is customary, I guess I have to do some thank yous in my speech about the throne speech. So I'll begin by thanking my parents. I know they're watching today. My mother was furiously texting me and wanted to be able to see me on the legislative channel, which is very nice and sweet and brings a tear to my eye. Well, my parents earned every single gray hair that they have from raising my brother and myself. And I can't thank them enough for everything they've done to me. I know I've tortured them in some way, in small ways, but so I have to thank them. I'd also like to thank my wife. Without her patience and support, I wouldn't be here. And I also like to give a shout out to my wife. She just started at Chilliwack Hospital as a medical lab assistant. So she's working on the front lines and is a frontline worker. She takes blood from patients. She does all sorts of things. I have no idea everything she does. It's just amazing, all the things she does. So, and with that, I'd really like to thank all the frontline workers during this difficult time. I mean, what a year it has been since my last throne speech. You know, fires, floods, COVID, waves of COVID. It's been a really tough year for all of us, and especially for frontline workers, and I'd like to just thank them all for everything that they do. The throne speech lays out a vision to support people by improving childcare, making life more affordable, reducing poverty, advancing reconciliation, and investing in the services people rely on. You know, government plans to continue to support people, whether that's to rebuild after the fires and floods or getting through this wave of COVID. And I think it's fair, Madam Speaker, to have empathy for folks who are, I guess, sick and tired of all of these measures and vaccines and the rest of it. I think we shouldn't talk about them with derision. However, COVID-19 is a disease and it just doesn't go away just because you want it to. So I encourage and I thank all the citizens in my constituency for getting vaccinated. You know, people say, oh, well, society's divided. It really isn't. 90% of British Columbians are vaccinated. It's probably the most support for any political, well, it's not a political position, but it's the most support for anything that I know of in my recent memory. So I'm so proud of my colleague, the Minister for Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation. He moved quickly to set up programs that normally take months to get going, and he did it in a matter of weeks. Through his ministry, the government has provided $500 million to businesses through direct grants, and this work continues. And I've spoken to a small business owner in downtown Chilliwack, Madam Speaker, and she has taken advantage of these grants. Many of you might know the business. It's called The Bookman. It's a little bit famous in British Columbia. And, you know, Amber and her husband are amazing, and her father are amazing and have kept this bookstore going. You know, 2020 was a very hard year for them, and Amber says the business had substantial loss. And she thanks both the federal and provincial governments for supporting her and getting her through this hard time. So this is a quote from Amber. "The bookman is grateful to have been able to access wage subsidies, CERB, an accessibility grant, the small business grant, and the grant for improving our online presence. These incredibly helpful contributions helped put us back on our feet. They saw us through a very tough time, and we were able to create more equity and accessibility at our business. I am proud to say that we just had our best year ever." And I know she is currently working on doubling the footprint of her store in downtown Chilliwack. And it's an amazing success story in Chilliwack, and it would be a real shame to lose that bookstore. It's a real part of Chilliwack. So the devastating floods in the fall devastated many parts of British Columbia. They washed out roads and flooded farms and homes. In my community, we were forced to evacuate 1,000 homes. And Chilliwack was cut off from the rest of BC as roads were washed out and flooded. Highway number 1 is still was underwater and impassable. Grocery shelves went empty, and gasoline stations ran out of fuel. Farmers had trouble getting feed, and dairy farmers were having to dump their milk. Mr. Speaker, many of our residents also have deep connections. The part of my constituency that flooded, Madam Speaker, sorry, I go to Mr. Speaker, I apologize. The part of my constituency that flooded is called Yarrow, and it really is part of the Sumas Prairie. And so the residents in that part of my constituency have a deep connection with the Sumas Prairie and people who live on the Sumas Prairie. And we've developed a Resiliency Centre. I don't know if anyone knows where the Yellow Barn is. Yes. So I've been working with Chilliwack Community Services, the Mayor of Chilliwack. It is outside of Chilliwack. However, we've been working and helping set up this Resiliency Centre. The United Way has been involved, several local churches, the Mennonite Committee, Central Committee. So it's been an amazing success story. You know, farmers used to go to the Yellow Deli every morning to have coffee and interact, and they've really been missing that in their lives. And so this is an amazing success story, and I'm very happy about it. So on Monday, the Minister of Agriculture and her federal counterpart announced significant new supports to help farmers get their farms back up and running. The government is also continuing to have conversations with the federal government to let them know what the province needs to build back our communities. This includes cleanup, housing, rebuilding highways, and repairing infrastructure. Outside of building back better, the speech from the throne also included some great things on housing. Chilliwack is the second fastest growing community in the province. In fact, it actually has the highest in-province migration, mostly from Metro Vancouver because of, and I'm going to use quotes here, cheaper house prices, because I'm going to tell you about some shocking house prices now. House prices went up 43% this year. And, you know, it's amazing. I talked to a young constituent of mine, a young woman. Her and her husband have saved up a substantial down payment that, you know, a year ago probably would have been a 25% down payment. Now it's not big enough. The house she rents and lives in now was sold for $600,000 just before she rented it. 8 months later, it was sold for $980,000. And the current owner didn't want to sell it, but people were coming to him. He didn't even have to list the house, and he sold it for $1.3 million. That's an incredible price jump over the course of a year and a half or 2 years. It's amazing, actually. It's shocking. Yes, and so her family is going to have a very hard time ever getting into the housing market. So a cooling off period introduced by the finance minister is desperately needed. You know, some houses are selling for $500,000 above asking. Having a cooling off period would be an excellent start to making home ownership affordable again. The pandemic has been a shock to the housing market, and if it were not for actions that the BC NDP government took when we took office, the impacts would be far worse. The opposition had no plans to address out-of-control housing prices in 2017 when they left, and they don't have any ideas now. The only idea I've heard is from their new leader, who said that he would scrap the speculation and vacancy tax, which would take 18,000 rental homes off the market. Doing that is only good for people who have second homes that are vacant. That isn't good for most of British Columbia, and that's really helping out the well-connected and wealthy friends that you have. I don't think you're taking the problem seriously if that's your idea. Madam Speaker, I'd like to talk a little bit about the accessibility legislation that we introduced last spring, and just maybe tell the House where we're at with it. So as everyone knows, in the accessibility legislation, it requires government to form a Provincial Accessibility Committee. We've formed that committee, and we have great participants. We had our first meeting last month, and the candidates are impressive. And with your indulgence, Madam Speaker, I hope I can just, tell you who the candidates are and what they do. So we have Deborah Marie Abraham. Deborah Abraham, she's founded Unique Get-Together Society. She's of Caribbean Cree and Sioux descent. She has over 20 years of experience working in social services. Active in her community, she's a board member with Global Access Foundation, and she has also been a secretary for the Coquitlam Foundation. Cheryl Burns. Cheryl Burns is president of Canadian Union of Public Employees Local 1936. She's also worked as a legal advocacy program coordinator for the Battered Women's Support Services. Active in her community, she is an elected Persons with Disabilities representative on the BC Federation of Labour Executive Council. She's also a general vice president for QPBC and the QPBC representative for the City of Vancouver Joint Childcare Working Group. Vinu Abraham Chetaparakal. Vinu is deaf and works as a commercial banking analyst for an international bank headquartered in BC. Active in his community, he's a co-founder and co-chair of the Deaf Inclusion and Diversity Leadership Council BC under the Greater Vancouver Association of the Deaf. Spring Hawes, who is my co-chair, because I co-chair this committee, so I'm very excited to tell you that Spring Hawes is the co-chair. Spring Hawes, she incurred a spinal cord injury 15 years ago and is a tetraplegic. She is an entrepreneur and has served as a counselor for the District of Invermere. She's on the boards for the Interior Health Authority and Accessible Okanagan, and she's also a volunteer peer for Spinal Cord Injury BC. Ken Kramer, QC, TEP, is the founder and principal of KMK Law, and the law firm specializes in the areas of estates, trust, administration, elder law, estate litigation, and mediation. And he was actually a candidate and ran to be an MLA at one time. He's an excellent addition to the committee. Then we have Michael Mcclellan. Michael Mcclellan lives with a visual impairment and developmental disability. He's president of Empowering Self-Advocates to Take Action, where he teaches the course People Planning Together. He chairs the Self-Advocate Leadership Network Committee and co-chairs the Self-Advocate Committee for Inclusion BC. He's been a president of BC People First and a member of the Accessibility Comox Valley Committee, Madam Speaker. He works with Community Living BC and other community services. Maybe I should stop here too, because it's obvious that we are, nothing about us without us is really our guiding principle here, and that's why the minister, who is sitting in the chamber, appointed and chose these people. He did a great job. Kirsten Sutton is the Chief Technology and Information Officer at Vancouver City Savings and Credit Union. She's the chair of the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade and a director for Science, World, and BC Tech, and a member of the federal government's Task Force on Women in the Economy. She's also a member and past co-chair of the President's Group, which champions accessible and inclusive workplaces. She's a great addition to the committee. Rihanna Robinson. Rihanna Robinson is an Indigenous scholar of Métis ancestry and an assistant professor in the Department of First Nation Studies at the University of Northern British Columbia. She's a director and an ambassador for the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada. She's also served on the executive committee for ALS, SLA, Action Canada, and as vice chair for Carney Hill Neighborhood Centre, and as a director for the Prince George Métis Community Association. Rob Sleeth is a seminar facilitator with blind and sight-impaired consumers. He's also the founding president for Access for Sight-Impaired Consumers, and a director for the Canadian National Institute for the Blind Advisory Board. He's also been a director for the CNIB National Board, president of the Committee for the Promotion of Accessible Conventional Transit, and founding chair of Access Transit Users Advisory Committee for the South Coast, British Columbia. Mary Teague is a Gitxsan carrier from the Takla Nation. She belongs to the Laxgabu Wolf clan from the House of Ngup. Sorry, I'm very bad. She is the executive director of Child and Family Services at Carrier Sekani Family Services. She has also been deputy chief and treaty negotiator for Takla First Nation. And she is president of the BC Aboriginal Child Care Society and chair of the Indigenous Child and Family Services Directors. She's also a BC board representative for the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada. Jessica Vlingenhart is a trial lawyer for Fulton and Company LLP and a Canadian Paralympian in wheelchair basketball. She's a board member of Spinal Cord Injury British Columbia and is an ambassador for the Rick Hansen Foundation. She's also co-founder and a director for Kamloops Adapted Sports Association, and she has been an athlete representative on the Revenue Generation and Government Relations section of the Canadian Paralympic Committee. So that's just an amazing list of folks who are on our Provincial Accessibility Committee, and I'm very excited to get down to work with them and start creating regulations that make BC a more accessible place. And I should point out that while we're still working on the accessibility legislation, the government hasn't stopped, nor will it stop, from making spaces more accessible. And so there's great things that the government is doing. The Ministry of Environment has some great initiatives, has some wheelchair accessible washrooms, also cabins that wheelchair users or other people who use mobility devices can use. Very close to my constituency, actually, up at Cultus Lake. That's in the constituency of my friend from Chilliwack, Kent. And so, you know, government's doing a lot of good work here, so I'm quite excited about it. I do want to mention that you know, we're helping to prepare people for the jobs of the future with a generational commitment to develop the talent BC needs over the next 10 years because there's a skills gap. And my friend from Langley, Parliamentary Secretary for Skills Trades Training, is doing excellent work on this file, and I was so happy to hear about it in the throne speech. You know, something else that is helping to train skilled workers, Madam Speaker, is community benefit agreements. Community benefit agreements are an amazing thing when government builds large infrastructure projects and then can invest in its community at the same time. It's incredible. So we know nearly 20% of construction workers are age 55 or over, and just 12% are under the age of 25. Women represent only 14% of the total workforce and 6% of on-site employment. While Indigenous peoples represent just 8% of total employment, coupled with this, apprenticeship completion rates in BC are among the lowest in Canada. Only 40 to 45% of apprentices finish their programs. Without action, BC's construction sector is headed towards a crippling industry skills shortage. And to address these challenges, the BC government introduced the Community Benefits Agreement program in 2018. And also the wonderful work that my friend from Langley has been doing as well. So the CBA objectives include increasing the employment opportunities for women, Indigenous peoples, young people, and local area residents. Increasing apprenticeship opportunities with a target of 25% participation rate on CBA projects. Providing a more achievable path to a Red Seal trade certification for apprentices. Achieving a more stable labor and equitable labor relations environment. Improving the workplace environment. Making the industry more attractive to new entrants. Developing a diverse and skilled construction workforce to meet BC's long-term future needs. I think I'm going to wrap it up here, Madam Speaker, to the delight of many, I'm sure. But I just have to say that I'm very excited for this upcoming session and the good work that we're going to do and help to rebuild our economy, our infrastructure, and help keep people safe the whole while we're doing it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.